Concerns around the national budget gets our attention today with reports of curious insertions into an appropriation act that already carries the weight of a fiscal deficit of 31.45 trillion naira amid persistent economic hardship. Some of the curious allocations include the 1.3 billion naira budgetary allocation to a fake agency named PFIPC, or questions raised by Public Accountability Organization Tracker around the constitutional basis of 22.15 billion naira allocated in the 2026 budget for the construction of 106 royal palaces across the country, and another 8.05 billion naira earmarked for the construction of places of worship nationwide. As if that was not enough, presidential candidate of the ADC and former Vice President Alhaji Atiku Abubakar last week alleged the existence of 12.8 trillion naira concealed under the service-wide vote in the country's 2026 budget. These revelations and others around the 2026 budget that we shall explore today on the program raise concerns over weak oversight and just how hands-on the executive is in budget planning. Welcome to Political Paradigm, coming to you from Channels Television. I am Bukola Koka, standing in for your regular anchor, Terry Kumi. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break to bring in our guest. My guest today is someone who has a fair idea of the inner workings of government and how things move around. So let's get insight into what may have transpired without necessarily reaching conclusions, of course, until the courts and the National Assembly come up with the results of their investigation into this particular Presidential Foreign Intervention Promotion Council. And my guest today is Mr. Umar Sani, a former special advisor to former Vice President Namadi Sambo during the era of President Goodluck Jonathan. Of course, he is also a media strategist, a media and communication strategist. Mr. Umar Sani joins me from our Abuja studio. Mr. Sani, good afternoon and welcome to Political Paradigm.
Good morning, Bukola. How are you?
Very well. It's afternoon, actually. We're glad you could join us. While the court has set a date for the arraignment of this self-styled DG of what government would have us believe is a fake agency, the House of Reps has begun its own investigation. And just days ago, we heard the head of the Civil Service of the Federation saying that the office never allocated an office to Mr. Adeyemi, and she indeed explained that while applications were made, the request was made for an office at the National Secretariat, it was never granted because the necessary documentation were not provided by this agency. Is her explanation satisfactory?
You see, when you come to this type of situation and the thing gets bad, everybody wants to, get out of the problem. So there is no agency of government that will accept responsibility for anything at this moment, because the presidency has already declared that the guy is a fake person. And because of that declaration, nobody will take responsibility. The CBN will not take responsibility. The Accountant General Office will not take responsibility. The Office of the Chief of Staff will not take responsibility. The Office of the Head of Service will not take responsibility. And the Office of the SGF will not take responsibility. Everybody will be working towards ensuring that they withdraw, they are safe in the whole thing, because at the end of the day, they will be affected by the outcome of the investigation. So everybody will not be safe. But, as investigations go further, that is when we will begin to see who and who is involved. You can see that there are so many, gifts in the whole thing. For instance, the Office of the Accountant General is giving different perspective of the opening of account with the CBN and so forth and so on. So as time goes on, we will begin to find out if the investigation is really thorough, you know, and there is no sentiments attached to it, you know, everything will come out very clear as to who was responsible for what and how. Because nobody can just go to the Federal Secretariat and occupy an office and begin to sit in that office without any authorization from anywhere, whether official or verbal. They can tell you, go and start using it, pending when your application is treated. And then he will now go and sit down and start working. So anything can happen.
So if he didn't get an approval or an allocation for the use of an office at the National Secretariat, the question then is, how did he get an office in the National Secretariat where he operated from while he, you know, was the self-styled DG of this PFIPC? Is it possible that perhaps within the inner workings of government that somebody high-powered, you know, superseded the authority of the head of the Civil Service of the Federation and gave him a go-ahead to use an office at the National Secretariat? Is that a possibility within the National Secretariat?
You see, the head of service at this point is in the eye of the storm. And so the head of service will naturally come up with what she has, you know, within her desk. And what she has within her desk may be his application untreated or about to be treated, or is on transit. It has been treated but has not been released, or even it has been released but has not been forwarded. So they will now withhold it. So anything can happen. Like I said, the possibility is that there could have been personal contact. You know, the chief of staff could have said, okay, please, head of service, can you allocate office for him, pending when we will regularize it, you know, or the SGF can also say so. SGF can say, please, this is our employee. You know, we have already taken him. Kindly issue him an office, you know, pending when things will be regularized. And then he will get an office. But he cannot go on his own, select an office, enter the office, and begin to work in an office in the Federal Secretariat. That is not impossible.
Now, as we continue to x-ray this particular matter, the Chief of Staff has since answered the call of the ICPC for questioning. Does that send a strong enough signal in line with the call and public outcry from Nigerians that indeed he should step aside? While he hasn't stepped aside, this you know, appearance at the office of the ICPC for questioning, does it suffice amid this continuing probe?
No, you see, the probe is not even supposed to go to any government agency. If it goes to any government agency, it can be, anything can happen, it can be manipulated. You know, the government agency, because perhaps they have a very good relationship with him, or there could also be a presidential interference in the matter. You know, so things may not move the way it ought to be. Perhaps the president loves him so much and he doesn't want anything to happen to him. So he's sending him to ICPC with a clear instruction. Please try to find him not guilty. And so the public confidence will be lost completely from that type of investigation. What we want is, an unbiased, a neutral people, including the civil society and all relevant people that will come in and investigate the matter thoroughly and convince Nigerians who is truly guilty and who is not guilty. But in this particular case, you know, even where a guilt is established against the Mr. Adeyemi, Nigerians will still not believe it. There will be no trust. There will be no conviction that really the man actually, you know, was not cowed into. You can see the police went to arrest him to do this. You know, Nigerians have begun to see a pattern of intimidation, you know, to really break him down so that he will now go in line with government investigation. But ICPC is not the right place to go. And whether he appears in ICPC or not is immaterial. What is important is that people must believe that the investigation is fair, is neutral, and that the people involved are people of high caliber, people with, record of integrity, and good reputation. And that will put the investigation in the sound pedestal. And then Nigerians will not be convinced. If he is said to be guilty, Nigerians will believe that, yes, you are guilty. But as it is now, I think nobody takes the ICPC matter very seriously.
But should we take the investigation by the House of Reps seriously? Don't forget that the Chief of Staff to the President is himself a former speaker of that institution. And if they have decided to say, we are going ahead to probe this, should we trust the process for them to have the courage to embark upon this probe, which of course borders on their former principle?
The issue is not even about whether he was a former speaker or whether the House of Reps, are determined to conduct a transparent investigation. What is most important is how has the House of Reps fared so far in this dispensation? Can Nigerians trust it as a very effective house that has always stood by the people? It is important that Nigerians begin to, that the House, in investigating this, may have two, set of people involved. The House has always tallied with what government wants, and what clearly is what is government's desire and plan. However, now we are in a period of politicking, and because we are in a period of politicking, some people might have looked for tickets, and they have not gotten the ticket, and so they are angry. So in their investigation, they will try to be very aggressive against the government, so that government will now begin to look at the possibility whether during substitution they can now be brought in, because they have been wronged. So the investigation may not have a very sound mind towards, bringing, everybody will key in his interest in the investigation. And so I don't believe that the House of Reps has the wherewithal to be able to investigate this matter thoroughly. There could be influence in one way or the other.
Two things before we leave this particular subject and go to other concerns around the budget. Do you expect the House of Reps to summon the former speaker, its former principal, for questioning, since it had decided to embark upon this probe? And then, on the other hand, who issues a letter of appointment to the DG of any agency in the first place? And I ask because all of the government institutions involved are denying. The Office of the Chief of Staff said it didn't issue a letter of appointment. The Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation said it didn't issue a letter of appointment. So who issues a letter of appointment to a DG of an agency? And which officials should we be questioning, amid this scandal?
You see, by protocol, the office of the SGF is supposed to superintend over this. They are supposed to issue letters. However, because of the nature of the villa, people, slide into other people's responsibility and carry it out, even without official approval. If they are in good terms, good working terms, So, ordinarily, the Chief of Staff is not supposed to issue a letter of appointment. But if he does, and he has a good relationship with the office of the SGF, it stands, because nobody will question it. If not because of this issue has become public, nobody will go into details as to who actually gave him a letter. If he had been functioning, it would not have been an issue as to where he obtained his letter, provided he is discharging the functions of that office, and that he has already been, certified as, not fake. But now that he has been certified as fake, the issue of who issues letter will come into play. The issue of how the letter was issued will come into play. The issue of why the letter was issued is and by who. So even the person who signed the letter will come into play. The SGF is supposed to be the one to sign the letter, but he can also delegate the responsibility and say, okay, head of admin, sign the letter, or head of the directorate of social, sign this letter. Now, if they sign the letter and then the matter becomes a problem, the SGF will now say, no, I'm denying, I don't even know anything about that letter. And then the man who signed the letter will not be in problem. He will not be left with serious consequences of trying to extricate himself, and things like that. So it is not entirely correct to say that the chief of staff, when you are a chief of staff, that means you are head of staff of the president. And so certain times you have some discretionary powers like this, and then you can just, whisper to SGF, please, let me issue this letter. You can say, okay, go ahead. Since nobody will go and report to the president, there is a good working relationship.
So you are emphatic on the point that the chief of staff indeed has a case to answer on this particular one. And do you think
yes,
that
I believe so.
Do you think that the House of Reps would have the courage to summon its own former speaker to answer questions amid its ongoing probe?
No, they can summon him. Summoning him is not the issue. But the issue is whether they will ask him the right questions. The questions that will now show to Nigerians whether he is guilty or not guilty. If they summon him and they begin to become friendly and they are chatting with him over tea, and then they are clapping their hands and shaking their hands, and no tangible thing comes out from the summoning, it's more or less of a waste of time. But if they summon him and then they grill him, ask him the right questions that ought to be asked, and then they listen to him, respond to them, and then they will be able to decipher and determine whether he is actually part and parcel of the scheme or not. And that is what we want to know. Is he part of the scheme or is he not part of the scheme? If he is part of the scheme, let the due process take its course. But again, he cannot be in that seat and people will intimidate him because he will still have world influence over certain things. And in the House of Reps, they have a regard for their former speakers. So whichever, if he had been given any appointment and he needed to go to the House of Representatives, for screening, they will only tell him to take a bow and go because he is one of them. And he also, as it is now, he is also part of the influence, as to even when he's outside the House of Representatives, he's part of the people who will determine who becomes speaker, who becomes deputy speaker, who becomes this, who becomes that. So he is well grounded.
And so what is eliciting this as well as apart from the concerns around forgery is the fact that this agency was able to secure a line item in the budget to the tune of 1.3 billion naira. Speaking of other concerns around the budget, Tracker, a unit of Budget Foundation, is also identifying the existence of curious insertions into the budget and has questioned the constitutional propriety and the mandate of the institutions that have gotten allocations for the construction of palaces, to be precise, for the construction of palace, there's an 8 billion naira allocation, and for 22.1 billion rather, and for the construction of religious centers, there's an 8 billion naira allocation. Now, many have frowned on this, but what about the role of the executive in this, Mr. Sani? You have been in the executive before. Even when the National Assembly exercises its appropriation powers, when it gets to the executive for implementation, why doesn't this come up as a concern for the executive in the area of implementation? Why are there no whistles blown until we hear it from development associations like Budget and the others, who, by the way, say that this has been going on for a long time? So why isn't there any whistle blown on the part of the executive?
Okay, let me address this issue very squarely. You see, the issue of budget is a very difficult issue between the executive and the legislature. The executive brings the budget as a form of an executive bill to the National Assembly. And members of the National Assembly will also like to insert those things that are very important to their constituency, and that will also promote their political life within their own domain. So you will see a lot of insertions. Now, previously, there has been arguments as to why will you insert this? Because you have inserted this, I will not sign the budget. It had become so popular. Now that what normally happens is that the executive allows them to do whatever they like. They put everything they want to put in the budget. But when the president signs it, when it comes to implementing those areas they put and the presidency is not aligned with it, it will not be implemented. That is when you will hear people shouting certain aspects of the budget have not been implemented. But they will not tell you. They will not bring it to public notice that what we are saying is that we have put some so amount of money for the building of palaces and they have not been implemented. They will not say so because they know there will be public backlash. But they will be shouting that it is against the constitution for a budget not to be implemented wholly. Then all those things that have been inserted into the budget, why you will catch the executive is when they begin to implement those things. Once those things, if you see palaces, contracts have been awarded for the for the renovation or for the building of a new palace, then you begin to wonder, does the work of Nigerian government include building palaces and so forth and so on?
So Mr. Sani, if you're saying that the executive really is in bed with the National Assembly on this curious insertions into the budget for the construction of churches and palaces, then if we went by anything that the development experts are telling us, that this has been going on for a long time, that means that the administration that you served as well is guilty of this particular trend in budgeting.
No, what you ought to understand is not, don't try to push a blame on our administration so that you believe that because my explanation does not go in line with your general thinking. No. You see, like I'm telling you, it depends on the leaders. Now, some leaders don't like to argue. Some leaders will not sign it. If you take a look, there are so many things that were brought to Buhari during his period. He refused to sign. He said he will not sign them because perhaps it is not part of the intention of the budget. So he refused to sign. There are so many others too like that with Jonathan. He refused to sign. So many things that were brought to him. But if a leader believes that, look, these are the people I put there. I am the one who supported them. I supported the member of the House of Representatives to become Speaker. I supported Akpabio to become Senate President. And they have brought this thing before me. Let me not argue with them, but I will not implement it. Let me just approve it and I will not implement it. And so there will be no implementation even if it is part of the budget.
All right. I will need to do an audit of the budgets between 2011 and 2015 to be sure that the administration that you served can be absolved of blame in this particular trend in budgeting. But just before we go, and I'll appreciate it if you can do this in 60 or 90 seconds at best, the presidential candidate of the ADC and former vice president is also alleging that there is existing in this 2026 appropriation 12.8 trillion naira concealed under service-wide vote in the budget. What are your thoughts on this? Should this remain in the level of allegation, or there is a possibility that this in fact does exist?
Well, you see, a budget is a public document. Anybody can get a budget, look at it, and then fish out things he believes are not supposed to be there. The candidate of the ADC is within his political rights, and constitutional rights also, to fish out things he believes, are fishy within the budget, and then to bring them out to public for public scrutiny. And so by doing that, exercising his constitutional responsibility, the public will also be able to scrutinize. And in such scrutiny, the public will be able to determine whether such things are, there are something hidden for ulterior purposes or that they are for good intention.
All right. We must anchor at this point. There could be many more follow-ups to that, but we must thank you very much. Mr. Umar Sani is a former special advisor on media and communications to former Vice President Namadi Sambo during the Good Luck Jonathan era. He's also a media strategist. Thank you for bringing your experience to bear on this conversation.
Thank you so much.